A wave catches the hull wrong, and the lifeboat flips completely upside down in open ocean. The crew is hanging from their seatbelts in total darkness. The ceiling is now the floor, and seawater is pressing against every seal on the vessel. This should be the end of the story. But within seconds, without anyone touching a button or pulling a lever, the boat rolls itself back upright, and the crew carries on. No motor drives it. No computer commands it. The hull does it alone, and the engineering behind that trick starts with a fact. Most people get exactly backward. Most people assume a boat wants to be right side up. It does, but only to a point. Every floating vessel is held upright by two forces working against each other. Gravity pulls the entire weight of the boat downward through a single point called the center of gravity. The ocean pushes back upward through a different point called the center of buoyancy. When those 2 points are aligned vertically, the boat sits stable. Tilt the boat, and something useful happens. The underwater shape of the hull changes, which shifts the center of buoyancy sideways. Now gravity is pulling down in one place, and buoyancy is pushing up in another, and the gap between them creates a rotational force, a righting moment, that tries to roll the boat back to center. The bigger the gap, the stronger the correction. This is why most boats recover from moderate waves without any help at all. But keep tilting. At a certain angle, the righting moment stops growing. It peaks, then shrinks, and eventually crosses zero. Past that threshold, called the angle of vanishing stability, the two forces switch sides. The gap that was saving the boat now accelerates the capsize. Gravity and buoyancy are still working, but they're working together to keep the boat upside down. The hull is now more stable inverted than it was upright. This is not a malfunction. This is the default physics of nearly every vessel on the ocean. Flip a sailboat, a fishing trawler, a patrol craft past its vanishing angle, and it will stay exactly where it lands, keel in the air, hull to the sky. A self-righting lifeboat is engineered to make that crossover point impossible. Its righting moment never reaches zero, not at 90 degrees, not at 120, not at full inversion. The forces always point back to upright, and that unnatural behavior starts with how the weight is arranged inside the hull. The designers start at the bottom. Every heavy component on the boat, the diesel engines, the fuel tanks, the water tanks, the ballast, gets packed as low inside the hull as it can physically go. The goal is to create a concentrated mass sitting deep in the structure, a dense core that gravity is constantly pulling straight down. This is the keel effect, and it means the boat's center of gravity sits far below the waterline, anchored there by hundreds of kilograms of machinery that will never move. Then the designers do the opposite at the top. The cabin and canopy above that heavy base are built from fiberglass reinforced plastic, lightweight composite panels, and closed-cell polyurethane foam. These materials are structurally strong enough to take a beating from open ocean conditions, but they share one critical property. They desperately want to float. The upper structure of the boat is not just light. It is actively buoyant, packed with foam that the ocean will always try to push toward the surface. When the boat is sitting upright, this arrangement simply makes it very stable. The heavy bottom resists tipping, the light top doesn't add dangerous height to the center of gravity, and the boat rides waves the way any well-designed vessel would. Nothing remarkable happens until the boat goes over. At full inversion, the entire system flips into a configuration that physics cannot sustain. The heavy keel is now sitting on top, and gravity is hauling it downward with the full weight of the engines and ballast behind it. The buoyant canopy is now submerged, and the ocean is shoving it upward with a force proportional to all that trapped air and foam. Those two forces open a gap between the center of gravity and the center of buoyancy called the righting lever. and that lever stays positive through the full 180 degrees of rotation. The boat doesn't tend toward upright. It is forced there. The physics will not allow any other resting position. But this entire system depends on one condition, so absolute that everything collapses without it. The canopy has to stay dry inside, because that sealed air isn't just protecting the crew. It's the buoyancy that drives the entire recovery. Strip away the engineering language and the self-righting system is an air bubble. The sealed cabin traps a volume of air inside the canopy, and when the boat inverts, that air is what the ocean pushes against to generate the buoyancy force that flips the hull back over. Every kilogram of righting force depends on that air staying exactly where it is. The moment water enters the canopy during a capsize, it displaces the air, kills the buoyancy, and the force that was supposed to save everyone disappears. The boat stays upside down with people strapped inside it. So the engineers built a sealing system with one rule: nothing powered, nothing digital, nothing that requires a decision. A weighted pendulum hangs inside the hull, and as the boat rolls past a critical angle, the pendulum swings vertically under its own gravity and mechanically closes a capsize flap, blocking the main ventilation opening before seawater can reach it. No sensor triggered it. No computer calculated the timing. A weight fell, a flap shut, and the interior stayed dry. The same principle runs through every other opening on the boat. Ventilators are designed to seal themselves automatically when submerged. Hatches use heavy-duty gaskets rated for full submersion pressure. Drainage valves in the bilge close on contact with rising water. The entire defense is passive because international maritime law demands it. SOLAS regulations are explicit on this point. The self-righting capability must function through inherent design characteristics alone, not through any active system that could malfunction. The reasoning behind that requirement is as practical as engineering gets. If you are boarding a lifeboat, the ship behind you is sinking. The power may already be gone. The crew may already be in the water. The one thing that absolutely cannot fail in that moment is the thing keeping you alive. And the surest way to guarantee it works is to make sure it has no parts that need to. A wave hits the hull broadside and the roll starts fast. The boat tips past 30 degrees, past 60, past the point where a normal vessel would settle and recover. It doesn't settle. The wave is still pushing. The horizon tilts sideways, then vanishes entirely as the cabin crosses 90 degrees and the windows go underwater. Everything unsecured inside the boat becomes a projectile, launched across the cabin in whatever direction gravity is currently pointing, which is changing by the second. The crew feels none of this as impact. They're strapped into shock-absorbent seats with multi-point harnesses designed for exactly this scenario. As the boat passes full inversion, they're hanging upside down from those straps, the weight of their own bodies pulling against the belts, in near total darkness because the windows are submerged and the cabin lights are fighting to stay on. Seawater is pressing against every seal on the hull. The pendulum flaps have already closed. The ventilators have already shut. The air inside the cabin is holding. Then, the righting moment takes over. The heavy keel dragging downward and the buoyant canopy pushing upward generate a rotational force that starts pulling the boat back through the inversion. The roll reverses. The hull swings through 180 degrees and slams back down onto the surface, right side up. The windows clear, light comes back. The engines, which idled automatically the moment sensors detected the capsize, restart. The crew is upright and operational. Hong Kong's Fire Services Department commissioned the world's largest self-righting vessel, a 200-ton boat stretching 35 to 40 meters, and it completes that full sequence in 6 seconds. 6 seconds from fully inverted to fully upright and ready to continue the mission. RNLI rescue crews in the United Kingdom train for this deliberately, flipping their boats in wave tanks in open water so the experience is familiar before it ever happens on a real call-out. One crew member described being launched airborne by a breaking wave, the boat fluttering like a mattress in the air, then plunging underwater. The helmet camera footage showed the entire event lasted seconds. He was back on the water within a week because the boat did exactly what it was built to do, and so did he. Not every lifeboat gets lowered gently into the water on cables. On cargo ships and offshore oil platforms, the escape route is a free-fall lifeboat mounted on a ramp at the stern, and the launch is exactly what the name describes. The restraints lock, the release fires, and the boat slides down the ramp and drops into open ocean from heights that can exceed 10 meters. The hull hits the water at speeds that would crack a conventional small craft apart. The crew sits backward in reinforced seats with body and head restraints because the deceleration on impact can reach 3 Gs, roughly the force of a car crash compressed into a fraction of a second. The hull is shaped so that the impact itself drives the boat forward and away from the sinking vessel without any engine power. SOLAS requires positive headway immediately after water entry, meaning the boat must be moving away from the danger the instant it surfaces, carried by nothing but the momentum of its own fall and the hydrodynamics of its hull design. But the violence doesn't end at impact. The boat can submarine completely beneath the surface on entry, tumbling through forces that are faster, more chaotic, and less predictable than anything a storm capsize would produce. And after all of that, the boat must self-right from whatever orientation the impact leaves it in. Fully loaded with crew, no human action, no second attempt. This is a harder engineering problem than surviving a wave. Storm capsizes are rotational and relatively slow. A free-fall entry is a high-speed collision with the ocean followed by an orientation that could be anything: sideways, inverted, partially submerged at an angle no designer specifically planned for. The self-righting system has to handle all of it on the first try, because there is no second launch. The ramp is on the ship, and the ship is the thing that's sinking. Self-righting doesn't prevent a capsize, it survives one. In extreme seas, a lifeboat can be flipped multiple times in succession, each inversion hammering the crew against their harnesses and testing every seal on the hull. The system resets and works again, but the people inside accumulate damage that no engineering can undo. Smaller lifeboats don't self-right at all. The RNLI's D-class inshore boats carry no enclosed cabin, no weighted keel, no passive righting system. If one capsizes, the crew goes into the water and flips the boat manually using ropes and their own body weight, in whatever conditions caused the capsize in the first place. That is the low-tech end of the spectrum, and it still works because the crews train for it relentlessly. And even on fully enclosed self-righting lifeboats, the entire system rests on a single assumption: that the watertight integrity holds. A cracked seal, a hatch left open in the chaos of abandoning ship, a structural failure from impact that lets seawater into the canopy, any of these turns a self-righting lifeboat into one that stays inverted with people strapped inside it. The engineering is extraordinary, but it is a calculated bet that passive physics, if arranged precisely enough, will outperform any active system at the exact moment when everything else has already gone wrong. Every lifeboat bolted to the side of every ship you've ever seen is a quiet engineering argument that the worst moment at sea is survivable. Not through electronics, not through computers, not through anyone making the right decision under pressure. Through the shape of the hull and the placement of the weight. Gravity pulling down, buoyancy pushing up, arranged so those two forces never stop fighting to put the boat back where it belongs. But getting the lifeboat into the water is its own problem. Launching from a ship that's already listing 20 degrees in the dark with thousands of passengers, that story is next, and if you don't want to miss it, you know what to do.